Hey, this is Pablo Hidalgo from Lucasfilm, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z, or Zed for Canadian and British listeners. This is the podcast you're looking for.
Thought it was a bunch of mumbo-jumbo. A magical power holding together good and evil, the dark side and the light. The crazy thing is, it's true. The Force, the Jedi. All of it.
I shall not fail.
Really scraping the bottom of the barrel with General Wheezius there. You know, back in the day I had Darth Maul. You know, before he came apart.
You're a great warrior, Anakin. But you'll need to prove yourself as your undoing. Until you overcome it, a Padawan you will still be.
Hi there! Customers! I better get started. I always wanted to do this. Wait, which was it? Nope. Here we go. Hello, folks. I'm DJ Rex. This may be your first time here, and it's mine too.
Do you, when you look at something like Star Wars, recognize some of the themes of the hero throughout mythology?
Well, I think that George Lucas was using standard mythological figures. The old man as the advisor. Well, specifically, what he made me think of is the Japanese sword master. I've known some of those people, and this man has a bit their character.
Well, there's something mythological, too, isn't there, in the sense that the hero is helped by this stranger who shows up and gives him some instrument, a sword or a sheaf of light, shaft of light.
He gives him not only a physical instrument, but a psychological commitment and a psychological center.
This is Vanessa Marshall, Harrison Dula from Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to Coffee with Kenobi. This is your weekly spoiler-free place for Star Wars community and conversation. I'm your host, Dan Zaire, delighted to talk Star Wars with each and every one of you. Since May of 2013, whether you're a fan of Star Wars films, Disney Plus live action and animation, books, comics, collectibles, or Star Wars opportunities at the Disney theme parks, on Coffee with Kenobi, you are among friends as we virtually share a cup of coffee while talking about this galaxy far, far away. Thank you to the official travel partner of Coffee with Kenobi, MEI and Mouse Fan Travel. Check out www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel for a no-cost, no-obligation quote, and let them know Coffee with Kenobi sent you. On today's show, we have a really special treat. John Booker from the Joseph Campbell Foundation joins me to talk all about the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell himself, and how it relates to Ahsoka. So pull up a chair, grab your favorite coffee mug, and let's have some coffee with Kenobi. Joining us today for a cup of coffee. Boy, I'm really excited about this one. We have talked, for over 10 years of Coffee with Kenobi about Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. And I've been wanting to explain that for quite a while. And it came to me as if in a dream that I should have on a guest I've been wanting to have on this show for a very long time. His name is John Booker. You may be very familiar with John's work. He is an author, a filmmaker, and he works. I don't know your official title, John, but first of all, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, man. Thank you. I've been a fan of the show for a long time, so it's a real pleasure and honor to get to be on the show.
Well, it's an honor to have a cup of coffee with you virtually. Now, you and I got to meet in person at Star Wars Celebration Anaheim, and that was a real treat. You had a panel there on The Mandalorian and the hero's journey, which was fantastic. And now Ahsoka has come out, so I think there's a lot to talk about there. But before we get into that, what brought you into this world of storytelling and Joseph Campbell and just this thirst for mythology that you have?
Yeah, it really, for me, started at a video store. And for those listening who don't even know what I'm talking about, older people like myself used to actually go to these buildings where all the movies were before streaming services, and you would rent movies and bring them back home and watch them at home. And you would often make it all the way through all the videos in the store and start watching your favorites over and over again. And I fell in love with Star Wars from a very young age, and that was quite instrumental in my falling in love with storytelling, because it became something that I not only experienced on screen, but I would every birthday get these action figures and start creating my own stories with these characters. And before we had so many Star Wars stories out there, when there were just the three films and a couple of comic books and a couple of books, you really didn't have all these backstories of characters. And so I would sometimes even take my Star Wars figures and throw a G.I. Joe figure into the mix and bring that character into this world. And so, through Star Wars action figures and through the films, they really brought me into this world of storytelling. And when I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark, I said, I don't know how, I don't know where, I don't know what, but I want to be Indiana Jones. That's what I want to do with my life. So I'm a mythologist now that gets to study all these ancient rituals and sacred objects and, old mythical stories. So I feel like I've gotten as close as I possibly could to growing up to be Indiana Jones. And now I serve as the executive director of the Joseph Campbell Foundation. And that position is a great honor for me because I am getting to carry forth the legacy of the person that brought an understanding of myth to George Lucas, because that's who George Lucas was under the tutelage of. He was the apprentice of Joseph Campbell in so many ways. So I feel like things have really come full circle for me after playing with those Star Wars action figures as a child.
See, you might even say the force is strong with you. That's a very low-hanging fruit, but come on, it's ripe. Oh, but that's another fruit pun. That was not intentional. So I love that you mentioned Indy, because I've always said that as much as I love Star Wars, and I've dedicated a significant portion of my life to it, as have you, Indiana Jones is my favorite character, and Raiders of the Lost Ark is my favorite movie. And I see in your studio that you've got some great Indiana Jones iconography. I've got some too, but your camera is set up much better than mine is. So there's a love there. You mentioned the word mythologist. And when I talk to people about mythology, to my students in my mythology classes at high school, I say mythologists are like cultural anthropologists in a way. But how does one become a mythologist? It's this. I love that term, and it's a study of myth. But walk us through your little hero's journey.
Yeah. So when people ask me that question, and I get asked that a lot because I put that out there on social media. I have business cards that say mythologist, and so people ask me a lot. John, what is a mythologist? And my answer is that we are they that study the stories around the mystery.
Beautiful.
The mystery of what it means to be human, the mystery of is there something beyond what we see and hear now, the mystery of consciousness in many ways. What does it mean for us to be awake and able to tell stories to each other? And I think human beings for a long time have wrestled with these questions and wrestled with these issues, and we've wrestled with them in the most intense ways through the stories that we have told. And if we look back at ancient stories, they're wrestling with all the same questions and issues that we see Indiana Jones wrestle with or Ahsoka Tano wrestle with. I mean, these are the same issues that we we're wrestling with, even in this cultural moment, of what does it mean to be me? What does it mean to be a human? What am I supposed to be doing here? Those are the big questions that mythology gets at. So on a practical level, we go back and we study the stories, the rituals, the characters, the sacred objects, the things that people have used to try and make meaning out of the world that we live in.
So if you were trying to audition to be a guest speaker, you passed the audition. Yes, see, that's just the thing, isn't it? I feel like you can learn more from a story and from the heroes in these stories than you can maybe, and I'm biased from a history book, because what we put into our stories is our values, our beliefs, the way we think it's appropriate to treat our elders, to treat each other. How do you handle conflict? Where does redemption lie? And what about forgiveness? What about love?
Yeah.
There are so many beautiful things that are in that. And of course, it's all encompassed in Star Wars to various degrees. And you fell in love with Star Wars. A New Hope was the first movie you saw, obviously.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes. Do you have a favorite in the franchise?
I am a bit boring in my favorites because I, like many people, will forever sing the praises of Empire. Empire Strikes Back is just the perfect Star Wars movie for me. And I know I'm not alone in those feelings, but I feel like in many ways it got beyond just trying to tell a story that would be compelling to an audience, but it's about telling a story that feels true. I admire a certain writer who once said that when we encounter mythic stories, it feels more like we're remembering something that we've forgotten as opposed to hearing something for the first time. And there was something about Empire that for me felt like I was remembering something I had long forgotten as opposed to encountering that story for the first time. So yeah, Empire Strikes Back will forever be my favorite Star Wars story in any medium, anywhere. I will go to the mat for Empire, always.
Yes, well, you're in good company. I definitely feel the same way, as do many people of our generation. I think I vastly between that, the original, and even The Last Jedi. I feel like those are all very beautiful in their mythological structure. But what you were talking about reminds me of the whole Jungian archetype and what drew what Campbell first talked about in his exploration of The Hero with 1,000 Faces. So if you were going to talk to people about Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, how it seems almost insulting to say, well, let's just talk about it over an hour, because that couldn't even scratch the surface of the beauty of this. How would you explain it, though, to our listeners?
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely talk a little bit about some of the particular stages, but the way that Campbell explained it was quite brilliant. Yes. Because he started by just talking about it having three major stages or three major areas: separation, or what he sometimes called departure, initiation, and return. And these three things, I'll give you just a few little thumbtacks to put in each one of these, so you've got a sense, and then we can talk about some of the particular stages within each one of these major phases. But this idea of separation or departure is the first stage, and this is where the normal world of the heroic individual is determined, demonstrated, and shown to the audience. In other words, we have to see what life is like before the hero can go on an adventure, before anything can happen. We have to see what the normal world is like.
Like working on a moisture farm, for example.
That's right. Exactly. And we get a sense even from the opening scenes of New Hope that okay, there's this princess that's out there trying to do something. There's this Darth Vader that seems to have a lot of power, and he's a bad guy, and there's darkness here. We get a sense, even from the opening crawl, of what the normal world is like living in this galaxy. So we've got that idea. Well, it then becomes important for the hero or the heroic individual. And I should say, by the way, that in The Hero with a Thousand Faces, when Joseph Campbell talked about the hero, he did not describe that as being a specifically male idea. As a matter of fact, throughout the course of the book, he talks about a lot of what he calls female heroes. He doesn't use the term heroines.
Thank you for saying that, because that's a popular critique.
It is. And there are a lot of really fair critiques of Campbell, but that one is always bothers me a little bit, because that one, I don't know that it's that fair, because Campbell talks about, this heroic force being an individual, an energy of sorts that has really nothing to do with any gender whatsoever. But once we've established what the normal world is, it then becomes important for the hero to have to leave or depart that normal world. Now, this can happen in one of two ways. One, it can be that circumstances force the hero out of the normal world, but most popularly, the hero makes a choice to leave the normal world. Now, sometimes it's because your aunt and uncle are burnt to a crisp that you decide to make that decision to leave the normal world and to go out on this adventure. But whatever the reason is behind it, it is usually important that the hero makes that decision for themselves to go out, to depart the normal world, and to go after something. Now, what this thing is that they go after, Joseph Campbell called the boon. And here's another thing that often gets lost in this idea about the hero's journey, is the entire journey is about not just going and getting the boon, because in the hero's journey, that happens about halfway through the story. It really, the second half becomes about bringing that boon back to the community. So the hero's journey is really about, how can I contribute to a larger culture, a larger society, the larger group? It's not just about me being this heroic person that goes and does great things, but it's about me going and getting something that my home community needs and bringing it back to them. That's the essence of the hero's journey.
Yes, and I feel like that last stage sometimes gets lost in popular media, or it kind of gets bogged down in news stories or concepts that are not necessarily bad, but they're not. I feel like one of the most pure examples of this is, I think of the Odyssey.
Yeah, that's right.
I feel like that's kind of the gold standard for this. It is.
That was Joseph Campbell's favorite example of the hero's journey, was to talk about the story of Odysseus. And, you can so easily, match every stage of the hero's journey to something that happens in the Odyssey. It's funny you bring up that. I was listening to a lecture earlier today of Joseph Campbell talking about the hero's journey in the Odyssey. And, some of the things that he is able to pull out of the Odyssey and allowed me even to see today, it speaks to Campbell's brilliance, because now we live in a world where the hero's journey is such a popular topic of conversation in pop culture, especially. We take for granted that, before Campbell came along and wrote that book, and George Lucas finds it, and it really makes its way into pop culture. This was a really novel idea. This was not something that people were thinking about. And now we can't I grew up in East Texas, so forgive me, Dan, but we have a saying called "You can't put the poop back in the horse," and this is exactly the case when it comes to the world that we live in now. The hero's journey, it's become so synonymous with certain ways of telling action adventure stories or space fantasy stories that we can't unsee it now.
So when I do a thing about halfway through the semester where I have students find a popular story that they like, whether it's from a streaming series or a film or a book or graphic novel or whatever, video game, and I said, now we're going to map out the hero's journey. What I don't tell them quite fully until we get into it is that you're actually mapping about half of it, because it can be extraordinarily daunting, for people to digest. But I think that is part of the brilliance, because getting people to think and critically analyze and enjoy the discourse, the rhetoric, is such an important thing, and I know you completely agree with that. So, how many? If we just go halfway. How many steps are there?
Yeah. Well, in this is even a topic of debate among Campbell scholars, because Campbell wrote The Hero with a Thousand Faces in 1949. And, he continued to develop the idea and talk about it for decades to come. And so, depending on how you break it down, for some people there's 14 stages. For some people there's 21 stages. Guys like Chris Vogler, who wrote the writer's journey, Chris is a friend of mine. He took those stages and he articulated them in a slightly different way. Here's what's important, I think, about looking at the stages of the hero's journey that, I think a lot of people miss. When it comes to mythic storytelling or mythic ideas, we are often looking for them to be a formula that, there's these 14 stages and they have to be in this order and they have to happen like this. And the way that Campbell talked about the hero's journey and what he called the monomyth, it was never really about it being a formula. It was about it being a form. So there's a difference between a formula and a form. So I'll give you an example of that. I have some friends that teach tango classes. And so once I went and tried to take a tango class, and they taught me all the steps of tango. They taught me the formula of tango. But one night they took me to a milonga and I was able to watch people actually dance tango. And it had nothing to do with those steps they had taught me. It was about the form of the music and just the energy. And I think many times when it comes to art, we want to somehow categorize these things to be able to nail down, a formula. I look at the hero's journey like this. Campbell developed all of these stages of the hero's journey. And if we put all those stages into a big glass jar, and we drop that jar on the floor and we pick up all the pieces, I think what we have are these shards that we can make all sorts of different mosaics out of. Because sometimes we see elements of the hero's journey, these stages he talked about, and we see, oh, wow, this one comes before this one in this story. Or this one only has 4 of these stages and they're over here. Now, there is a bit of a classical form that Campbell talked about that we see, these stages typically start here and it goes through this cycle and we end here. But it's not meant to be something that is a rubric we have to hold up and say, well, does it meet the standard of the hero's journey or not? That's just not, I think, the most skillful way to use the hero's journey or to look at it. Even in Ahsoka just wrapped, right? And yes. When we think about Ahsoka, in a sense, it is a very incomplete hero's journey because, I mean, this is about someone who never finished their journey to become a Jedi Knight. And when we think about that automatically puts us in a place of saying, okay, so is the story of Ahsoka season 1 just about trying to, get a particular character back home, in that's going to be the journey? Or could we look at it and say, maybe, spoiler, this is my theory about the season, I think this is Sabine Wren's hero's journey story. I don't think it's so much Ahsoka's hero's journey story. I think it's Sabine Wren's hero's journey story. And one of the ways that I look for clues to determine, whose heroic journey this is to look and ask myself, which character changes the most over the course of the journey? Which character arcs the strongest? And I think there's a pretty strong argument that it's Sabine's character, that more strongly arcs. This is Luke Skywalker in A New Hope, right? Luke goes from the kid on the farm that does not want to even go on the journey, right? Because I got to take care of the droids and got to feed. Dinner's going to happen. I got to be back in time for. And he goes then from that guy to the guy who's willing to sacrifice everything to blow up the Death Star and to push forward the cause of the rebellion in the galaxy. So that to me is what I look for in trying to nail down who's following the hero's journey in a particular Star Wars story.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I explain to my students, look, this is an organic concept. It's very malleable. And while there are some things that probably need to happen before other things, some of these steps may kind of jump around a little bit. And that's the entitlement of the storyteller and how they want to do that. There are certain things that you can't help but bring into story, again, because of these Jungian archetypes that Campbell was such a fan of that are so fascinating to, what are the things that we relate to the most? What are the things that we have in common? What are the stories that we respond to the most over time? And of course, we need to talk about Ahsoka because that's the most recent. And I would say I've loved just about everything Star Wars, some more than others.
Mm-hmm.
Some have hit me much more authentically than others.
Yeah.
Ahsoka felt the most Star Warsy to me since maybe Return of the Jedi. And that's not a knock on any of the other existing stories. I mean, I think The Mandalorian is brilliant and fantastic and a key component of my Star Wars fandom. But there's something about Ahsoka.
Yeah.
Now, the fact that Sabine could be argued to be the main character of the story, or as far as it being her hero's journey, I agree with that. Here's a challenge that I had in the episode where Ahsoka encounters Anakin and goes into a world between worlds. My challenge for that is, to me, I don't really know what Ahsoka learned in that episode. I'm not sure what her arc even actually is in this entire season itself. So I'm curious to see kind of how you respond to that.
Yeah. Well, this is a really important question because Dave Filoni is someone who deeply understands Campbell's work.
Absolutely.
And many times Dave Filoni is taking one of those shards of the hero's journey and he is putting that in a place in his mosaic that causes us to have to rethink, what is he doing? How is he using this? So when I think about, this encounter that Ahsoka has with Anakin, there is one part of me that immediately says, well, it's the meeting with the mentor, right? There's a meeting with the mentor, that's happening here. And I think if we look at Sabine Wren's journey as being an external hero's journey, I would posit or suggest that Ahsoka's journey is a journey within. Certainly. It is a heroic journey inside, and we get little pebbles of things about how she's being challenged and how she's having to change through this story. Now, I will add a critique to your critique here.
Please.
I feel like one of the things that is wonderful about Ahsoka is also one of the things that I think is most problematic about Ahsoka, and that is, if you haven't seen Rebels or Clone Wars, you're probably going to be lost into the motivations of a lot of the characters in the show. Mm-hmm. And I'm not the first one to make that critique, and I think it's a very fair critique.
It's honest and very fair.
It is. And so, when we talk about what, Ahsoka's arc is, what she's trying to accomplish, in one sense, we could say she's trying to complete the training of Sabine. Or we could say, she's trying to get Ezra back home. Or we could say that what she's really trying to do is find out who she is throughout the course of the series. Now, that's a much more abstract idea. It's difficult for us to see that. It's a lot easier to see Ezra get home, a lot easier to see Sabine, continue her training. But I believe what Dave Filoni was trying to do was actually take us on this internal journey with Ahsoka of identity, that she's really trying to find who she is. And in one sense, she has these people that look up to her, that depend on her. And she's having to hold a certain mask or a certain face in order to do that. However, we also see her in these vulnerable situations, where we're flashing back to her early experiences as a Padawan. We're flashing back to see her journey with Anakin, long before these days that she's in now. And I think what Dave Filoni was trying to do is a very difficult task, and that is to take an internal learning process and externalize it in some way. Mm-hmm. A lot easier to do with these characters that have really clear external arcs. I also think the character of Ahsoka is probably a more difficult, heroic character to try and take on a journey, because a lot of paint is already on the wall from Rebels and from Clone Wars that you're having to work within in order to keep, canon faithful.
Yes.
And that, I think the bigger these stories get, the more difficult that becomes.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
So recently I was working on my website. I was running into some things that I didn't really quite know how to handle or what to do. So I turned to my good friends at Lumenfire Brilliant Solutions, and they helped me create things on my website I never thought possible. Lumenfire builds brilliant custom apps and websites that make businesses more effective, productive, and profitable. This includes automating business processes and integrating software systems so they talk to each other. They are experts in FileMaker, Laravel, WordPress, Apple, and other technologies. Check out their site at lumenfire.com. And if you want an example of that, reach out anytime. I'm telling you, they helped me with coffeewithkenobi.com. I could not be happier with it. It runs faster. There's more great things going on behind the scenes, and it's all because of my amazing friends at Lumenfire. Be sure again to check out their site at lumenfire.com for more information. Yes, well, very well said. For me, Ahsoka, I agree, is very much an internal struggle. As I'm watching this, I mean, it's clear. I mean, for Sabine, that's her death of the mentor when Ahsoka's gone, or at least out of her stratosphere in many ways. And I guess while I'm watching it, I do want to be clear, and I know people listening already know this. I love the episode, and I think it's brilliant in many ways. I think the challenge I had for it as a lover of story and myth is the struggle that we have. We are led to believe that Ahsoka's struggle is, am I anything without my lightsaber? Am I just about fighting? And we've seen, as fans of the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, as you mentioned, that she's much more than that. She's fulcrum. She helps to bring these factions of the rebellion together. She works behind the scenes for a long time to foster and cultivate a way to usurp the burgeoning threat of the empire. And all those things are done to perfection. But the challenge for me is, as the hero, as you said, maybe we are finally seeing a mythological structure where we are getting to see the hero return back home in many literal ways. I mean, this show is so literal that she's in a belly of a whale, a purrgil, which of course is definitely not lost on you.
No.
And I thought that was tremendous. I mean, there are a lot of wonderful winks and nods to it. I think it's problematic though, in essence, because at the end, of course, we lost Ray Stevenson.
Yep.
So the final shot of him with the Mortis God statues in the background, while beautiful and breathtaking to longtime fans of Star Wars, to people who only know the series from Ahsoka, and again, that's okay. You find yourself thinking, well, what was the point of Baylan and Shin when there's zero resolution to their story? And through to that point, there were major parts of this. And I'm very aware that sometimes you put out threads for sequels and future stories. Yes, of course you do. But not at the expense of the individual story that people are experiencing. So how do you kind of respond to that?
Yeah, well, I think this is a problem that Star Wars is familiar with, because the creators have painted themselves into corners before and wrapped themselves up into things that it has taken brilliant storytellers to come along later and try and tease out the threads from in a way that makes sense, right? Because some of the creative decisions, not the least of which have been made by George Lucas, by the way, but many of the creative decisions, you've really had to have someone come in and bail those creative decisions out. I think with Ahsoka, one of the clues that we get about what is happening here, because I completely agree with you that there's, especially when it comes to the villains this season, there's some work that needs to be done, because Shen, it seems like her whole purpose is just to be ordered around by Baylan the whole time. But this is a really great character. This is a character that there's a ton of opportunity for. And I'm curious to see with the loss, of Rey, if they're just going to recast Baylan or what to do. But I know there were, critiques of Rey as Baylan, but to me,
he's great.
To me, he just embodies so much character and so much storytelling just in just looking, into the distance on screen. But I do think, there was nothing given to people who were unfamiliar with, the Mortis gods or any of that. There was nothing given. Why is he bailing out? What is his bigger plan? Why is he all of a sudden just going rogue off into the outback?
That was his point from the beginning, from the first shot.
Yeah.
And then no.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll see some sort of resolution. I have nothing but faith in Dave Filoni and Lucasfilm for sure. But I would be disingenuous if I didn't at least bring that up, and I was really excited to kind of hear your perspective on that. We do get to see Ezra again. Ezra, one of my favorite characters. He has a great role in the hero's journey too, because his mentor is, of course, Kanan Jarrus. And then he very much takes on the mantle and learns to, hey, my mortality is a real thing. I've got to become my own person, rise above. And he does, even to the point, John, where he gets this wonderful beard. Beards were not on Joseph Campbell's initial radar per se, but they always seem to work, don't they? There's this wonderful wisdom. I guess Merlin is sort of the archetype for this kind of a thing. Obi-Wan Kenobi, naturally. John Booker comes to mind. Isn't it kind of fun that this is an archetype inside the hero's journey or great stories, that when you see it, it's like kind of a non-verbal to us. Yeah. This is a wise person. This is someone to follow. I just think there's so much richness in that.
There is richness in that.
The more hirsute you are, the wiser.
With that logic, Chewbacca would be like the wisest of us all. But
indeed, he would.
But I think part of what it is, when there's an unkept appearance by an older person, it would suggest to us that they have not focused on the external things of this world, but have been deeply focused on what is everlasting, what is internal, what is inside. And they probably have been spending so much time reading books, they haven't had time to shave. Let's be honest.
I never thought about it from that perspective. That's delightful.
Yeah. Well, and let's even look at, Luke Skywalker's character, who later in life, is it just to mimic Obi-Wan, or does he recognize, what? But Obi-Wan has a beard from a very young age, right? Luke has to grow into the beard later. So, maybe there is something about the beard of wisdom that comes out. You bring up something else, though, that I think is really interesting, and that is over time how the mythology within the world of Star Wars has continued to expand. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean, if you had told me, when I first saw A New Hope, that one day we're going to get to have witches and shaman and all of these archetypal containers in Star Wars, I would not have believed it. I wouldn't even have known. If you would have told me, no, there's not just going to be the magical swords of lightsabers, but there's also going to be the blade of Talzin and these other mystical, powerful weapons that are more the domain of magicians than they are of warriors. And in a sense, I think that's been part of the beauty of Star Wars from the get-go that continues right up through Ahsoka. But it really started with A New Hope, the idea of the poet warrior. And that is Obi-Wan Kenobi to me, is the poet warrior who's really good with a lightsaber, but also speaks with the tongue of angels, understands the depth of wisdom that only those who have communed with that which is beyond us can understand. And from Obi-Wan Kenobi forward, we get this idea of the warrior poet that is something we can date back to Arthurian legends with Merlin, but even further back, we can go back to like the Hindu traditions and the Mahabharata and the Ramayana and these Vedic scriptures where warrior poets were very, very common. And that is, I think, something that speaks to balance, the idea of not just being a person of the sword, but being a person of the book and the sword. That Star Wars magically continues to deliver is, there's lightsaber battles that are amazing, but there are also amazing mythological stories. And this is not just something that, since we've seen the television shows, I think about C-3PO telling stories to the Ewoks at the end of Jedi. That is one of my favorite moments in all the Star Wars films, because it's a meta moment that we experience, by the way, in this season as well.
With Hu Yang.
Hu Yang tells a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. I don't know about you, but I almost burst into tears.
Oh, I exploded. Yeah, it was a master stroke, and I had absolute goosebumps for a very long time. Because they talk about again that whole meta concept, and then so bringing that idea. That's why, in many ways, Yoda's sort of a groundbreaking idea, isn't he?
Yeah. Well, and I want to circle back to something you said a few minutes ago that I thought was really profound. You've brought up, Jungian archetypes a couple of times in our conversation here, and one of the classic Jungian archetypes is the archetype of the child, and that's what Jung calls it, is the child. And the child archetype is often amplified in different ways. There certainly is the child, and by the way, it's no accident that they called Grogu the child, in so much of the Mandalorian. But there also is this amplification of the child that is what we call the divine orphan child. And this is something that Star Wars continues to play with, and it started with Luke Skywalker. When we first meet Luke Skywalker, we don't know what happened to Luke Skywalker's parents, right? He's living with his aunt and his uncle. We only know that he's orphaned. This, of course, is not common. Just Star Wars. This is, Harry Potter is an orphan. We could go on and on and on with all the characters, that are orphans. Why is that? By the way, Jung suggested the power of the orphan archetype was because that each of us identifies with the character of the orphan, because we understand that all of us have to grow up inside ourselves and depart the wisdom of our parents. We have to leave home internally and hopefully externally as well. Most of us grow up and end up moving out of our parents' house at some point. But really, it's an internal journey that we're trying to become orphans. We're trying to leave our parental relationships behind to become our own individual. Now, this idea that Jung talked about of the divine orphan means that sometimes that orphan finds out that their real parents are divine in some way. This even goes back to, mythology from the Judeo-Christian tradition where Moses, finds out that he's actually been raised, in the Pharaoh's palace, but that's not who his family is. Even the figure of Christ, right, whose father is God. This idea of a divine orphan that is somehow separated from their parents. It's not just Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia. It's Rey, and we see it through characters all throughout Star Wars that are orphaned. So this is just one example of these Jungian archetypes that Star Wars leans into. It's why Star Wars is good mythology, not just because of the presence of the hero's journey, but also because of these archetypal characters and motifs and rituals, some of which we saw this semester with the Night Sisters playing a particular important part in the culture and meaning making of the galaxy.
I'm glad you bring that up, and of course it is the Halloween season. We talked a lot about this. I had Jen Sobchak on, and she's a professor in California as well, and we talked a lot about this and the idea. I mean, when you think of 3 and witches, Macbeth naturally springs to mind right away. The idea of 3, as a sacred trinity. 3 has always been a sacred number in mythology, and then these. The witches come in and they sort of do a funhouse mirror version of that, because clearly there's nothing There's nothing good going on with them. But why are witches so important in mythology?
Yeah, we can trace back witches in mythology to
Celts,
the
right?
Greek. Yeah, the Greeks, talked about the Gorgon witches that share an eye, and
That's right.
We've got witches throughout mythology. Part of the fascination with witches comes from our human fear of the dark feminine. There is something that
Crohn's.
Absolutely. There's something that we as human beings don't quite know how to reconcile with the dark feminine. And we can put this in our human forums and say, well, how does society look at grandmothers and things like that? But I think it's more helpful to think about this in terms of inside of every person is masculine energy and feminine energy, right? And certainly we have, we may operate with more of one than the other, but inside of every person is both masculine energy and feminine energy. And I think that fear of witches, or that fascination with witches, is a fascination with the dark feminine energy inside of every person, regardless of what their gender is or how they identify. But there's a fascination with that dark feminine energy. This, of course, has been very thematic in mythology with the feminine underworld journeys, or what we in mythology call the Nakia. And a feminine underworld journey, it could be going back to the Babylonians. It could be something like Inanna going on her underworld journey. My favorite is with the Greeks, and it's the journey of Persephone, who's taken to the underworld by Hades. But we also see it, we see in episode 7, Rey descending the staircase and going on an underworld journey of her own, where she has this mystical experience and these encounters. And that dark feminine experience is scary to many of us. And so I think that is where a lot of our fascination with witches comes from. In the same way, human beings are fascinated by werewolves, that really profound, strong, masculine, hirsute energy that in some ways Chewbacca does represent. Really tall, really, almost like a dog meets a monkey, type presenting. But there's also something that feels really, really the amplified masculine in Chewbacca. But he's a good guy, right? Chewbacca is not hurting anybody. He's a pure soul, as we might say. He's well-intentioned, and he's fighting for what's right. So I think in Star Wars, one of the great gifts it's given to the world is it's given us these characters that are able to embody strong, healthy masculine energy, embody dark feminine energy, and everything in between. Like we see all of that getting brought to the table through these stories, which I think is one of the reasons so many people resonate with them, because we're able to see ourselves in these characters and in these mythological mirrors that the creators are able to share with us.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
I honestly can't think of a better way to end this conversation. You are definitely a gift to us, my friend, because it's pretty fun. So I give these lectures, daily and in school, and I travel a little bit. Definitely not near as much as you, talking about this kind of stuff. So it's so great for me. One of my favorite things I heard someone say It's Olin Kreutz. He was a former center for the Chicago Bears. And he said, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And so that I am absolutely delighted to be in here in this room with you, because you are such an inspiration to me and such a fountain of knowledge. And plus, you tell a great story, which is as it should be, considering what you do for a living. So very, very grateful to have you on, John. You're certainly welcome back anytime. Please let everybody know, of course, please let everybody know where they can reach out to you and some of the things you have going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, please check out what we do over at the Joseph Campbell Foundation. Our website's jcf.org, and you can see everything we're up to. Follow us on all the social media handles. You can find us all there. You can find me. My website and my Instagram handle is Telling a Better Story. So you can go to tellingabetterstory.com or follow me on Instagram at Telling a Better Story. And I post a lot about myth and Star Wars and these things because they are so near and dear to my heart. And Dan, I want to thank you because I've learned so much from listening to your work and the books you've written and the shows that you have created have been part of my Star Wars education, and I am deeply grateful.
Well, how about that for a blockbuster show? I want to thank John Booker again for sharing his time and talent. I just sat back sometimes and just listened and learned from the master, and it was a great experience for me. I hope that you enjoy learning about it as well. I'm sure we will talk much more about Ahsoka, the hero's journey, and hopefully have John again in the future to break it down for us even more. I also want to thank each of you for joining me, twice a week on Coffee with Kenobi. There are so many ways you can enjoy Coffee with Kenobi. For example, and probably the best place besides this podcast is the website coffeewithkenobi.com, your place for Star Wars news, announcements, reviews, videos, and so much more. The official travel partner of Coffee with Kenobi is MEI and Mouse Fan Travel. That's coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefan-travel. It's your place to go for a no-cost, no-obligation quote where you can support me, and you can also get your magical vacation planned to anything Disney-related, including the East and West Coast homes of Galaxy's Edge, which of course are Walt Disney World and Disneyland. They can also help you plan your Disney cruise and make your travel as easy as possible and give you that peace of mind we all appreciate when planning your family vacations. Every Tuesday night at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on coffeewithkenobi.com/live, you can join me and talk about our top fives for the week. This next week coming up, we're going to do a top 5 of our favorite moments from the entire series of Ahsoka. Now, coffeewithkenobi.com/live will bring you to a web page where you can get links to Coffee with Kenobi's Facebook page or the YouTube channel, and they stream live to both places. But all the information you'll need will always be at coffeewithkenobi.com/live. If you like talking about things online, you can go to our Coffee with Kenobi Facebook group, which is the CWK Cafe. That is your place for Star Wars thoughts, comments, reviews, and opinions in a family-friendly, spoiler and drama-free place. You can find the CWK Cafe at coffeewithkenobi.com/community. Coffee with Kenobi is possible because of the members of the CWK Alliance. Thanks to this very special group, this podcast, CWK Live, event coverage, and so much more is able to come to life. Find out how you can help the show for as little as $1 a month by joining the CWK Alliance, and you'll receive access to CWK Pour-Over, an exclusive weekly audio and video podcast not heard anywhere else. Members at the CWK Alliance All-Star level receive a video edition of CWK Pour-Over and access to a private Facebook group as well. Plus, CWK Alliance Grandmasters join me for a monthly live video call. Go to coffeewithkenobi.com/CWK Alliance to sign up and learn more. And 10% of your monthly contributions for our Patreon page, the CWK Alliance, go directly to the St. Jude Children's Hospital. You can email me, danz at coffeewithkenobi.com. Connect with me on Twitter at Mr. Zer, MRZEHR, on Instagram at DanZerCWK, and on LinkedIn. Coffee with Kenobi is on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, TikTok. You can give the show a like at Facebook at facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi, or subscribe to Coffee with Kenobi's YouTube channel. Please take a couple of minutes to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. If you love the logo, go to coffeewithkenobi.com/shop for t-shirts, hoodies, stickers, and so many more fun items with the Coffee with Kenobi logo. If you want to start a podcast or a blog or expand your brand, go to danzymedia.com. I am also available to come to your school, conference, business, or organization to talk about how to tap into your strengths and help you bring out your very best. Thank you as always for joining me for a virtual cup of coffee. I appreciate your time and look forward to the next opportunity to talk Star Wars with all of you. I'm Dan Zaire, reminding you that this is the podcast you're looking for. See you next time, friends.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
There's no one here. Move along.